Hi, it's Andrew from Acuity AutoRedact. Welcome to the Data Protection Weekly podcast, where we wrap up all the biggest issues affecting data protection professionals in the UK each week. Okay, let's set the scene. You work for a company and its marketing department just found the most amazing new analytics platform. It'll double conversion, it'll half their workflow. They're practically vibrating with excitement and they're ready to sign the contract. In fact, they were ready yesterday. Then you, the data protection officer, step in and say, "Oh, have you done a data protection impact assessment?" How do you get people to care about the need to assess data protection impact? So let's think about this. You could end up being seen as the enemy of progress, the roadblock that's keeping them from hitting targets. And it doesn't have to just be in marketing. It could be turning around after any significant internal change and saying, well, actually, we need to think about the impact that this could have on the data protection for our customers, for our students, for our staff, for whoever we serve. It could be the general public. It could be public services that you offer and people who are using them. It needs to be done, but you don't want a data protection impact assessment to feel like some kind of bureaucratic wet blanket. It's meant to serve a purpose. And it doesn't have to be seen as a roadblock. What if you could turn that eagerness for new tech into a collaborative compliance process that's centered around the data protection impact assessment? So what we're going to look at today is the multi-million-pound question. How do you get teams adopting new tools to care about data protection impact assessments? Now, if you're operating in the UK, you already know the baseline. Under UK GDPR, a DPIA is required if you're doing something that poses a high risk to the processing of people's data. The ICO guidance, likewise, is very clear when adopting new technologies, particularly those involving automated profiling or large data processing at scale. You need a DPIA, and you need it early, not at the end of the process. But here's the harsh reality. Pointing to ICO guidance doesn't make someone care. If they found a tool that promises to automate lead generation, save the company a lot of money, make the company a lot of money, save a lot of time, drastically reduce workload, the immediate reaction is we need to do this. It just needs to be done. And the immediate promise of increased efficiency is going to outweigh the risk of an ICO fine. People will turn around and say, I'm not bothered. I think a fine is very unlikely. We need to push ahead. And when teams are desperate for a new tool, they can view the data protection officer as a bit of a hurdle to jump over, or worse, to bypass entirely and enter the dodgy realm of shadow IT and shadow AI that we're starting to see emerge in workplaces up and down the country. So, it might be that, they start to expense the software on a corporate expense card and hope you don't notice. And, we don't want that. Or, worse, treat the DPIA as a sort of tick box exercise after the contract's signed. So, you need to think about how you win people over. And I think we really need to shift the narrative. We need to not be the department of no and need to be the department of how. We need to tell people, well, actually, a data protection impact assessment isn't there to stop you using new tools. It's actually part of the process to help you select a new tool that isn't going to blow up in your face 6 months down the road when you find out that all the data has been stored on some random server or box at the back of a cupboard in maybe China or India, where you're not fully aware that there's a data protection sharing agreement in place and it has to be shut down mid-operation. Think about it as risk assessment. So, what can we do? Let's always go to that Monday morning strategy. You walk into work on a Monday morning, how would you get people to care about DPIAs when they're desperate to buy the latest shiny SaaS product? And, I have sympathy with people needing products. I developed Acuity AutoRedact to streamline the process of the redaction of DSAR material. And, I deal with a lot of people who are like, yes, we want to buy this. And often I have to turn around and say, have you done a data protection impact assessment before internally, I know someone's going to turn around and say, has one been done? You know, it potentially is something that ethical providers should be talking about as well. But if you walk in on a Monday morning, what can you do to make sure that this is dealt with? Well, stop sending people a massive, daunting DPIA template the second they mention a new tool. It's just going to cause friction. You need to look at this as part of maybe something like calling it a vendor vetting checklist and keeping it to essential questions in plain English. What data will the tool touch? Where's the vendor based? Are they training AI on our data? Putting down clear questions that people can answer. Now, 5 might be too short, but plain English questions that they can ask to somebody on a vendor call and get the answers quickly, or that a vendor can fill in with a quick email. If it's a low-risk tool and it's just part of vendor vetting and it becomes part of standard procedure and it's literally just a matter of sending off a Word document or a Google Doc at the vendor saying, please fill this in, return it, and then you read it and check the risk and consider that, then it's not a friction process, is it? It's just, we need this form filled in by them. And it's not complex, but, we need to make sure that it's put in place before the process is done. And then you can take that back in and notice if there's any red flags and advise the team if you start spotting them. And if it's an absolute disaster, the team are going to be grateful. Oh, I didn't know the data was stored in a data center that isn't legal to use. Thanks for finding that out before we were forced to stop it when we got into a problem down the line. Number 2, embedding the process in the procurement pipeline. If you find out a new tool's going to be purchased on the day that somebody is putting the invoice ready to be signed off, then it's too late, isn't it? If finance turn around and are ringing you saying, do you know this new product's been purchased? Well, you've lost the battle. You need to make sure it's just part of the procurement process and it's asked early on. And don't make the team come to you, meet them when they buy. Work with finance and IT teams to make sure that procedures are in place to stop software being onboarded or paid for until that's completed as part of a process. As long as it's part of a process and it's done, it will happen. That's how things get done. Where things don't get done is when they're not part of a process. So make sure that privacy checks are done as part of the process. This is low friction as well. You're not slowing down the process. You're not getting to the point where someone's ready to buy and you're going, no, actually, we've got to audit it. You've audited it with them as part of the buying process. You've been involved in the buying process and you've helped them to do the DPIA as part of the purchasing process. You've not done anything that will generate friction. You've been part of the process and done the bits you needed to alongside the team procuring. And as this gets more known as a procedure, you'll start to realise that teams know they need to tell you the second they're thinking of procuring something. And as long as you're just part of the process and doing the DPIA with them and it's not slowing anything down, why would anyone resist it? I'd love that. Purchasing software. If someone was sat next to me saying, before you purchase that, I'm just going to ring that company and I'm going to ask them to fill in the vendor checklist, which, contains data protection impact questions so we can risk assess it as part of the process and just check everything's safe as we're purchasing. I won't get in your way, but I'll flag up anything if I think it's a risk. I'll be like, brilliant. You're helping me do my job. You're meaning that I'm not going to run into problems down the line. It's positive, isn't it, if you do that? So don't make the DPIA the final check off at the end. Make it part of the process. And also, number 3, frame the DPIA as vendor leverage. Now, I think this is a game changer. Stop framing the DPIA as a test the internal team has to pass. The last thing you want is the internal team saying, we've got to prove this product's safe. We've got to prove it's low risk because it's really good. Actually, make it a benchmark for the vendor to pass to prove that they are safe. Tell the teams that it's actually to make sure that the vendor's secure and won't get sued. It helps us negotiate better terms or identify if their security is poor, and actually we should start looking at a competitor that's going to be more stable for the organisation and the work that you're doing. I mean, that's good. If I had somebody sat next to me whose job it was full time, or at least a significant amount of their job was to turn around and say, I'm going to check this vendor, I'm going to make them answer these questions, check they're secure, not going to lend us in risk. And then if you do find a significant risk, well, it's a shame, but yeah, the product can't be used. And you found that during the due diligence, not when we're jumping over the moon excited about a new product. So thinking about it and framing it as a way that's protecting the team from buying bad software, well, actually, who wouldn't want that? You're the ally of the person procuring, and you're not interrogating them. You're making it clear you're helping them interrogate the vendor to get the best deal possible for the company. I mean, who wouldn't want that? You're providing quality assurance for the shiny new tool to make sure that actually they might be excited about it, but when it goes live and you're suddenly discovering that there's huge privacy questions, and maybe that CRM is storing its data in a way that could be easily intercepted, or that is being, worst case scenario, selling on customer data or something terrible, you've stopped them implementing that bad software. You're part of the solution, you're not part of the problem. And again, it's not for the internal team to prove the software is safe, it's for the vendor. And that's really important, because I think a lot of people see DPIAs as, oh, this is something I'm passionate about. This software is my passion. I want this in. But actually, it's not for them to prove it's safe. They didn't make the software, the internal staff in your organization. It's the company that produced it that did. So, that's something really to consider. Right. Well, as always, it's been a great pleasure discussing data protection with you. And if you are redacting any information for DSARs, you can by all means reach out to me on Acuity AutoRedact's website. That's acuityautoredact.com. We provide a 200-page free account for anyone who signs up, so that you can redact up to 200 pages of data to help you with a DSAR. And if those 200 pages aren't enough, we offer a range of really low-cost paid options, starting at £370 a year, that let you process 10,000 pages. So if you're redacting documents for DSARs and you need a bit of help, check out Acuity AutoRedact. We do it instantly using AI, but then put you in the driving seat to control it and make sure the redactions are what you need. Right, well, as always, remember, good privacy is good business, and I hope to speak to you next week and talk about some other data protection issues as well. In the meantime, keep safe.
Data Protection Weekly.